Hello, Tansei. Good afternoon and welcome to APTN InFocus. I'm Darrell Stranger. As I'm sure you have heard, Melissa Ridgen has left us for another opportunity, and we wish her nothing but the absolute best. And I will be taking over APTN InFocus this season. Today, we're putting Indigenous chefs in focus. And we always want you to join in on our conversation, so you can email infocus@aptn.ca, or you can send us a tweet at APTN InFocus on Twitter. So let's just jump right into it. A brand new season of Moosemeat and Marmalade, the sixth in fact, is underway. The smash hit here on APTN has a bush cook Art Napoleon and classically trained British chef Dan Hayes exploring Western Canada as it was shot during COVID. Usually they're traveling the world exploring Indigenous cuisine with a modern touch. And Melissa Ridgen caught up with Napoleon to talk about how COVID affected the show and what's in store for Moosemeat and Marmalade lovers this season.
Well, Art, it's always good to have you on and chat about Moosemeat and Marmalade. It's one of our favorite shows here, of course. But you guys were not immune to COVID restrictions shooting this sixth season. So it's primarily in Western Canada. Did you find that restrictive, or is that kind of like right up your alley? I mean, you live there, you know the area like the back of your hand, and where to get what and who's who in the zoo?
Well, it's from an administrative end, it was very restrictive. We've even had a couple of communities bail because they were isolated and they had blocked off the whole community. And so we had to cancel a couple of, had to rewrite a couple episodes and find new places. So we started out close by, like we did some ones on the island, and then we started branching out. Then we finally made it as far away as the exotic town of North Battleford.
Well, that's pretty far from where you're located. Okay, I know that season 6 kicks off hunting squirrels. I'm slightly scared to ask you about that. And did we eat them?
Oh, of course.
No!
We eat everything we can.
I know you do. That's why we love your show, but I don't know squirrels, man.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with the meat. It's actually pretty good, and I think the people that ate it were really surprised at how good it tasted. I was going for like the Colonel's recipe idea of 11 herbs and spices. I researched them and I used them on the squirrel meat, and people really loved it. It's very similar to rabbit.
Okay, which I guess isn't super surprising. How many squirrels would it take to feed like one squirrel per person, or do we need 2 squirrels a person?
Oh, you only need about 1 squirrel per person. You cook it in a way where it spreads out, you know. We just made little nuggets, and we had some nice other stuff that we had foraged.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, what's the sides that go with squirrel?
I think I made a mash. I think we roasted potatoes and yams and mashed them with nettle and added some beurre noisette, or whatever the heck that brown butter stuff is, and it was really good.
I love. Okay, so does Dan ever get fed up with the adventures of some of the things that you come up with for him to eat? I mean, he's a buttoned up, guy, right? Does he ever just look and go, "I'm not doing that. Come on"?
Well, surprisingly, oh yeah, there was one time he would not eat seal intestines, but I don't know. He's got a thing about seal intestines. He ate moose eyeball and he ate moose intestines, but he wouldn't eat seal intestines.
That's an interesting line to draw. Moose intestines, yes. Seal intestines, no.
Yeah, I don't get the logic, but moose intestines are really, really tasty.
Well, I have never had them. I used to grow up, my grandma used to cook blood sausage a lot.
Right.
And I always like that's a comfort food to me. I know for like in my family, for your birthday, you get to decide like what do you want for dinner, right? And blood sausage with mashed potatoes and cream corn used to be one of my go-tos. I think my grandma made it for me probably the last time I was in my early 40s. Like that's one of those comfort things, right?
Well, actually, people might be surprised. Dan has been on my res, and he's been around now, so he's really developed a taste for wild game. He's more disgusted when I put a bunch of modern, fancy stuff. He thinks I should stay rustic and basic and traditional.
Well, that's why we love the show. So we're glad that Dan's advocating for the basic, rustic, traditional. I have a question for you. I've got was gifted some deer back straps in my freezer. How should I cook them? I'm worried about them being tough.
Now, backstrap can really never be tough because those muscles are not really used. You have to think of the anatomy. Backstraps, they don't get much exercise, so it's always going to be tender. You don't need to slice. So I slice across the grain, so you end up with these medallions. Okay. As long as you sear it, even just sear the outsides and go for the what's that, medium rare. Okay. That's how I would serve it. Put some chimichurri sauce or anything you want over top of that.
Does it have to be marinated?
It's so good that it doesn't need marinating. I just usually go with salt and pepper. But sometimes what I do is I'll dry age steaks. I will wrap each steak individually in a very light cloth, like a cheesecloth, and keep it on the rack in the fridge. Turn it over once in a while. You can go 4 or 5 days, and you'll get a crust on the meat that tells you it's ready, and it just adds a lot more flavor. And it actually kind of tenderizes it as well.
Doing that. I'm stealing that. Okay, back to season 6 of Moosemeat and Marmalade. I'll tag you in pictures when I cook it. If they turn out, if I screw it up, I'm not going to drag you down with me. But if it turns out, I'll tag you.
I think the trick will be not to overcook it because, it's a tender meat. It's soft. It cooks really quickly. And if you overcook it, it's going to get dry and rubbery.
Okay, I want it like rarer to medium rare. Okay, so back to season 6, Moosemeat and Marmalade. What was some of the highlights for you, whether it be places, people, foods that you cooked? What are some of the highlights?
Well, I get asked this a lot, but everywhere we go, it's all favorite to me because we get to meet cool people that are doing neat things, and we get treated like gold usually. So it's a new adventure everywhere we go. So there's no such thing in my mind as something being more exotic. I really enjoyed the buffalo hunt in Saskatchewan with the Poundmaker Cree Nation. Nice. And then we also enjoyed the wild boar hunt that we did there right near North Battleford.
I'm assuming wild boar is very strong flavored?
No.
No.
I didn't find it strong at all. It's similar to pork, except maybe a little tiny bit redder, tiny bit stringier, but there's no wild flavor at all.
Okay, I'm putting that on my must-try list then too. You've been doing this for 6 seasons. Is there something that you, like an eye on the prize sort of place, or something that you want to get into your culinary repertoire? Like if you could pick tomorrow somewhere to go or something to try, what would it be?
Well, it would be nice to go to New Zealand and cook with Maori people, or Mexico, Central America, cook with Indigenous people there, and especially with all the different things you can do with corn and other local plants. That would be cool. Cooking with other Indigenous peoples. Like, we're on our way to Sweden in about 2 or 3 weeks. But we're mostly around the Stockholm place, and there's no Maori activities and hardly any Maori people. They're all in northern Sweden.
Interesting. I didn't know that they had settled in Sweden, like moved up to Sweden too. I had no.
They're in most of the Scandinavian countries.
You see, you learn something new every day, especially if you're talking to Art Napoleon.
And the northern parts there, like northern Sweden, it would be a lot like northern Alberta, northeastern BC. It's the Boreal, Northwest Territories, Yukon. That Boreal forest is going to be very similar. So they actually have similar game to what we have. They have moose, they have beaver, grouse, the whole bit.
And this is shooting for season 7 now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Season 7.
You know, there's been such a resurgence in interest among like our foods, traditional foods, foraging, medicines. Like I'm curious what you've thought, because I've certainly seen it in the past couple years. You've been probably noticing it over much longer. What are your thoughts? Like, what's behind it? How come now?
Well, I think I'm not the only Indigenous chef out there that's kind of going back to traditional food sources. There's a few now, and I think we just naturally have the same kind of philosophy of bringing it more to the forefront, and also a lot of us are into food security, food sovereignty, being able to protect those traditional foods. And if you want to be able to protect that, it means you got to protect the habitats. And I've always been a land steward, so it fits right in with my life philosophy. And I'm glad that there's a new interest in it. I would hope that maybe even our show played a little role in that, because we do get emails from fans saying, wow, I didn't know this, I didn't know that. I was cut off from my reserves. I was 60 Scoop, and I'm learning so much about our food traditions from your program. Those are some of the nicest emails we get, knowing that, you know, we're an inspiration for some.
No, you absolutely are. There's a reason why you guys are one of the top shows here on APTN. Art, thank you for taking the time to chat with us. We look so forward to the further adventures for season 6 and many more seasons ahead. Thank you so much.
Viva APTN. Have a good day.
You too, Art. Good to catch up.
All right, if you're wondering where you can watch Moosemeat and Marmalade airs Tuesdays on APTN, be sure to check your local provider for times, or you can stream it on APTN Lumi. All right, we need to step aside for a short break, but still to come. If you like Indigenous cuisine and seeing Indigenous chefs, you might want to keep an eye on Top Chef Canada this fall. That's coming up.
Join our conversation now. Like us on Facebook on our APTN News page. Follow or tweet us at APTN InFocus, and send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca.
Welcome back to APTN in Focus. I'm Darrell Stranger. If you're a fan of cooking shows, then be sure to check out this season of Top Chef Canada. Tanya Bryant from Six Nations will be competing, and she recently made her TV debut this past week. If you're in or near Six Nations near Hamilton, Ontario, you can visit her in Oswego at her restaurant, where she's serving up Haudenosaunee fusion cuisine. She recently took a break from cooking up a storm to chat with Melissa Ridgen.
Tanya, we're so happy to have you join us. Tell us, where are you right now? This looks like where the magic happens. Right?
Yeah, a little small corner of res here. Yeah, I'm on Six Nations. I'm in Oswego right now. We're open for service, so if you see some people walking by, it's middle of lunch hour right now. So
oh my gosh,
we're doing it live. We do everything live.
I love it. Roll with it. Roll with it. Right? Okay. Before we get to Top Chef, I want to just go back. What got you interested in cooking?
I don't know if there was ever like a moment where I was just like, I want to grow up, I want to be a chef, I want to be like, it was just, I think, an evolution of my just life. Like I always liked food. I can remember like cooking grilled cheese sandwiches at like 5 years old, and now that I have a 5, 6, 8-year-old, like I was just like, Mom, why did you let me touch the stove? Right? But she's like, oh, you're okay. You're supervised, right? But yeah, it seems like every job I always had just went back to food, like working in high school and everything. Like I worked at our local bingo hall, I was in the concession stand, even our arena, but that was the concession stand, and a local diner. And so my first restaurant job was 12, and yeah, just in a local diner here on Six Nations. And it just seemed like everything just kind of kept coming back to food for me as I went on and went to school. I originally started going to school for like archaeology, and it just, something about it was just like, I was like, this isn't me, but I still love this. And so eventually I kind of asked my mom, like, you know, can I go to culinary school? And they're like, well, guess you can check it out for a year and see what happens. But,
well, so you go from cooking other people's food, if you're working in other places, what was the evolution to you then cooking like what you want and making your own recipes and coming up with these dishes that are your signature dishes? When did that happen?
Well, that's just like, that's the work of a chef, right? Like, that's the difference between a chef and a cook. Chefs are making recipes, whereas cooks are using recipes. So basically, I don't use recipes, right? And the idea of even making them now and putting on my website different things, I'm just like, you know, it takes effort when it's just like, you're used to just like, I'm going to go in the kitchen to make something. So that's a little different, but it did come along. In terms of working with Indigenous foods, didn't come along till probably about 20 years into my career. So
wow.
I've been working for 28 years in restaurants now. I just turned 40.
Wow.
So, yeah, so I started young, but it wasn't until I became a mom where I kind of ended up meshing those two thought processes of being raised traditionally and then working in professional kitchens for so many years. And then I started getting requests after I moved home. Like, I always lived in and around home, but I wasn't working in the community. So when I started again, I started having a lot of requests for traditional foods. Oh, can you make us some scone? Can you make whatever, right? Corn soup, didn't matter. And so I had another local caterer that I was helping him start his business at the time. And he's like, you can do this too. Like, you're doing it for me. Why aren't you doing it for yourself? And I really accredited him. I would say him and my mom, because she was the one growing and seed keeping and just kind of throwing these things at me that even I didn't know what it was growing up. It was just kind of like, here, I do this squash, here, go make it happen. So
that's incredible
that really
to have that support, though. You know, from somebody else who, you know, a lot of times in this colonized world we live in, it's very competitive, right? It's like, I'm doing this and I don't want anybody else doing it. So to have somebody who's doing something like that and encouraging you to go do it, put your own spin on it, your own take on it, that's a gift. That's a real gift to have.
It really is, and I do have a lot of respect for him in that sense that that he encouraged that, and we still work together. Like, we get a major event for 1,000 people, we're just, you know, kind of throw our staffs together and make it happen. So being able to do that and uplift other Indigenous businesses in my community, like, I think you couldn't ask for anything better, right? And to have that support, and I just think that that's incredible. And just to have that business mindset is really, it is an incredible thing, because there is a lot of competition. And
yeah.
My community's so big, there's no reason for us to have any competition here. There's enough jobs to keep everybody happy. I can assure you that.
What's your favorite dish to prepare?
Anything I've never made before.
Really?
It took me a long time to come up with that answer.
It's a first time thrill thing for you. Like, oh, I wonder what this would be like. That's
I'm
your
not
favorite?
about beating that old horse of making the same thing over and over, and this is my signature, and I don't like any of that. I'm just like, when it comes to Indigenous food, and that's why I have a daily menu at my shop now, is because I don't know how much I'm going to have of anything. It's harvested, it's fresh, we don't know what we're working with, and that's what I love. I'm just like, okay, what's in there today? That's what we're going to make, right? And I think that's, working with Indigenous foods has really benefited my chef career because of that, right? Like, this mentality, you know, like, I can walk in somewhere and have like $500 ingredients and think it's amazing, but I don't think that that's amazing. I'm just like, that person grew that piece of corn for me, right? That was forged by somebody's hands to put their time and their love and all of that into those foods, and to be able to make them something incredible that they can, like, take. And I feel like we're eating with our ancestors when we're doing those things, and we're recognizing them, and we cook our traditional foods for, like, our feasts. And I want to see our traditional foods of that, because I feel like our ancestors are the ones that haven't been able to eat these things in a really long time. And that's something for me in my career that I find really touching, right? And if I'm cooking, I'm making things that aren't necessarily for me. I'm making things for people that I know are there. I'm going to make my desserts that I know are my grandfather's favorites, and, you know, like, those are the types of things that I want to make, because I'm not cooking for me when we're doing those things, right? Like, you're cooking for people that are there, that even whether you see them or not, I want them to be invited, right? And to have them with you when you're cooking really it, right? Like, that's with you while you're preparing it too, and then eating and sharing and having that. I mean, I think that's, a lot of people operate like that, but I think that the world would be a better place if more of us did, right? You know? I wanted to ask. I've definitely had some pretty interesting experiences that way. Really? Can you share any? That nobody touched. who touched that. Literally had things like in my hand. So you're not the only one there when you're cooking like that.
That is amazing. Okay, so I want to jump ahead to Top Chef Canada. This was your first cooking competition. What was it like? I mean, I would assume it was intense pressure, but walk us through like the lived experience of it.
Yeah, well, it's a cooking competition, right? Now, all competitions are designed to be stressful, but this is a reality show cooking competition. Right. So you're doing like two things at once that most people do normally, right? So definitely designed to keep you moving on your toes, a little stressed. Like you're never comfortable, right? Like if you're comfortable, it's because you're not doing something or you're waiting for something about to happen. So those are fun to see and experience that. It took me a minute to get my feet wet and understand, okay, what do they expect of me here? And I think you'll kind of see that in the series that and it's just like a good time, right? Like to see other chefs, like we don't get time to go out. Like half of us are working 60, 80 hours a week. So
right.
You don't get much time to work with other chefs in that sense, right? So just that was incredible, being able to work with people across the country. I have 10 new friends I can go visit.
Well, we're obviously going to be cheering for you. Last question for you. I wanted to know, there's probably a lot of young budding chefs out there, especially because of these shows like Top Chef, watching and having this in their future or hoping for it to be. What advice would you have for those young to inspire those young chefs, or for people sitting at home like as old people who are getting bored of cooking and maybe looking for some inspiration to mix things up in our own kitchens, not to do it in a big scale, but just for our own families?
Would be too, like, if you want to be a better cook, or if you are looking at being a chef, like if you're young, there's never too young an age to start cooking. That's always important. Setting those guidelines, being young, that you're going to grow up and eating healthfully and thinking about your health. That's something I'm really super impressed with right now with adolescents and teenagers, that they are really cautious about what they eat. I know that wasn't even on our radars when I was that age. So that's incredible. And I can't wait to see what these kids do, because they've had everything. They've had every flavor, every cuisine, and then they've had them all mixed together too. Yeah. So I think food, in terms of where it's going, what our food looks like today is not what my kids and grandkids are going to be eating. But that's incredible to me, because some of those things are going to be our traditional foods that we don't have everyday access to. And that's what I would encourage people, just to get outside, see what's in your backyard. You would be so surprised at how many wild edibles are around us all the time, and they're forgotten, right? Yeah. And as soon as you start recognizing those things, they know mushrooms become more plentiful. Berries start growing in these bunches when they were just sporadic. Like, I feel like those plants feel like they've been recognized, and when we do that, like, that's helping us as well, right? And we're eating better, and we're taking more, antioxidants and vitamins and things that modern day foods can't even touch for us, right? Yeah. Like, our indigenous foods are so nutrition dense that, you don't even need to eat a lot of it. Like, that's the thing, right? You're totally changing everything. But just like engaging with your community, going to community events, and most importantly, why aren't foods here? Have people in every community. We have thousands of talented indigenous chefs across Turtle Island, and like, let's use that, right? Let's make our foods better, right? And that's what I feel like would be the most thing, that if we really wanted to encourage people with what they're doing now and how they would do that, that would be my thing, is just to get out there, try it. If you want to do this as a career, definitely, like, you have to know your hustle, you have to know your worth, and you have to be able to prove it. So it's like, it's a go hard industry, and if you want to be successful at it, it's definitely possible, but you have to be willing to put in the work.
I love this. Tanya, you're an inspiration. You make me want to go home and break out all my tasty goodies that have been harvested so far this summer and make something spectacular. Thank you for taking time to join us from your busy restaurant, and all the best of luck to you. We'll be cheering for you this season.
If you want to learn more about Haudenosaunee foods and, of course, cooking, you can visit chef TanyaBryant.com and watch her at work on Top Chef, Canada every Thursday. You can also subscribe to her YouTube channel. You can search Tanya Bryant for lots of interesting dishes there as well. All right, let's go to social media now with our social media editor, Jesse Andrushko, to hear what some of you are saying about today's topic. But before we do that, Jesse, would you have tried that squirrel that Art Napoleon had made?
I think I would. You know, I've got a lot of squirrels in my backyard. I never thought of eating them until I heard that, so I might. What about you?
I always say I'll try something once, and depending on if I like it or not, I might not try it again. But I have a feeling I might have tried it for sure. I always say try something once.
It sounded good. It sounded pretty good, right?
It did, and the way he made it seemed like it's something that I wanted to try. But anyway, Jesse, what's cooking online on our social medias?
Well, Darrell, we've actually compiled a list of Indigenous cookbooks for our viewers. So if you want to try your hand at cooking with traditional ingredients or learning more about our foods, these should be able to help. First, we have Modern Feast by Andrew George Jr. Chef George is from the Wet'suwet'en Nation and has been cooking for over 20 years, training and working across Canada. This cookbook takes traditional recipes and updates them to include modern flavors and ingredients. Tawa by Shane Chartrand. Chef Chartrand from Enoch Cree Nation has competed on Chop Canada and currently serves his dishes in the SC restaurant at the River Cree Resort and Casino. Next we have Where People Feast by Dolly Watts. From the Gitxsan First Nation, Dolly ran a restaurant in Vancouver for many years and was named winner of the BC Iron Chef. Dolly has created a collection of recipes that shows us how to prepare and preserve wild game and seafood. For those of you in the north or access to northern food, Niki Lee Nick is a cookbook compiled by 5 women from Igulik. They combine traditional foods like seal and Arctic char with store-bought produce. And if you want to try something from our southern cousins, New Native Kitchen by Freddie Bitsua, the Navajo chef who headed Mitsitam Native Food Cafe at the Smithsonian. This book offers a variety of flavors and a bit of food history from across America. Foods of the Southwest Indian Nation by Lois Ellen Frank, a photographer and food expert with help from Navajo chef Walter Whitewater, includes traditional recipes that are adapted to modern palates and common ingredients. And lastly, from Mexico, Decolonize Your Diet by Luz Cavo, a vegetarian cookbook. It features recipes combining Mexican history and traditional ingredients like corn, beans, squash, and seeds. All these books can be found on Amazon, or check out your local bookstore and library. If you have a favorite cookbook or would like to share your favorite meal, here's how you can do that. Join our conversation now. Like us on Facebook on our APTN News page. Follow or tweet us at APTN InFocus, and send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca.
All right, thanks so much for that, Jesse. It's time for one final break here on InFocus. But after the break, we will head on down to America and speak with an award-winning chef who recently won the competition cooking show Next Level Chef. Welcome back to APTN In Focus. I'm Darrell Stranger. Our next chef competed against 14 other chefs from across America for the title of Next Level Chef. Already an award-winning traveling chef, Piet combines her Indigenous and Mexican heritage to create her dishes. She recently won Next Level Chef. Let's take a look at that.
But only one of you is about to become the first ever Next Level Chef. That comes with a check for $250,000 and an extraordinary, unprecedented one-year mentorship to help take your dream to the next level. The person who will be our Next Level Chef.
Pick me. Please pick me.
I really, really want this. I still have so much more to give and prove.
I want to win so badly. It's time. It's time.
Congratulations goes to Piet.
What I've come from. I know the battles. I know the grit and the fight that I put out. Living out of my car, trying to make this dream happen. Oh my God. I never thought to myself that I was capable of doing something like this. I am the Next Level Chef.
Piet, that last course was the show winner. Absolute, utter perfection.
That's just amazing. A member of the Osage Indian Reservation in Oklahoma. She is based in Los Angeles, where she started her business, Piet's Plate, promoting nutrition and food quality. She sat down with Melissa Ridgen and served some hot tea that you'll only hear right here. Check it out.
Piet, we're so thankful that you could join us. I just have so much admiration for you, and I have a million questions about being on the show and Gordon Ramsay, but we'll start at the beginning, which is, how did you get your start cooking? What was the initial spark that set the fire?
For me, the interest really started building when I was a child. I grew up with family members that loved to cook. I had 2 uncles that owned restaurants, and my grandmother was a baker. And so everyone on my dad's side of the family, my Mexican-American side, everyone was just really passionate and competitive about cooking. You know, they wanted to make sure that they knew their recipe was better than everyone else's in the family. And so that's really how it started, with just the actual action of cooking. But also on my Native American side, my Indigenous side, there's a lot of celebration that happens around the table, and it's very important that the families are being taken care of. You know, the women would go out, and regardless if it was like the heat or if it's raining outside during powwow season or ceremony season or any ceremonies that we would have, the families would come together and eat together. But the women were always, you know, at the stove cooking for the families. And so there's just these 2 cultures that I grew up in that were both like very passionate about food, and the food represented different things, whether it be ceremonial or celebratory. And so that's really how the passion started kind of stirring up. But it wasn't until I became a young adult that I actually started taking it serious. And I was like, oh, you know, I like doing this thing. I love cooking. But growing up, it was just a lifestyle. Everyone cooked. You have these huge families. You have lots of cousins and aunties and uncles. But it wasn't until I started really dabbing in different cuisines and trying different flavor profiles that my passion for food really started to grow. And then I went to culinary school, and then it was just kind of ignited from that point on. I knew that the kitchen was a sacred place for me, and it was a place where I belonged, and I was happy to be there.
So you're literally doing what you love to do.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I'm so incredibly grateful and blessed, because I know there's a lot of people in the world that are constantly searching for their purpose or their passion, and I get to wake up and eat, breathe, and do it every single day of my life. So I'm so incredibly grateful.
Breathe, sleep, cook, and then eat what you've cooked. Yeah, you've got it going on. You've got a good system going there. How long have you been doing it for now?
So it's about 6 years I've been doing it professionally, going into 7 years.
Okay, so one of the clips that I had seen, I wanted to ask you about. You were talking about bison, cooking with bison on the show, and you made a point of saying, you know, the bison were killed off as a way of getting rid of the Indian problem. Really, how important is it for you to be using your platform for education like this?
Well, there's a lot of history that is unknown to the mass public, and so, you know, in history books in school, we're only taught a one-side story, which isn't all the way true. And so I love being able to tell the story of the food, and not just the story of my ancestors and my people, but also celebrate where we are as Indigenous people and celebrate where our food is. You know, it's been many years of being able to evolve and adapt, and we're kind of working our way backwards, myself and other chefs that are doing this work. And so it's so incredible to be able to utilize these ingredients that once were forgotten or almost killed off.
Right.
And it's thanks to my ancestors and the original people that occupied this land, that knew how important that connected relationship was to the food, to bring that food into, you know, their future. And so you have an example of that is in the Trail of Tears, where the Indigenous people that were on that path, the women would sow the seeds of pumpkins and rice and dried beans, or not rice, corn, and they would put those seeds in their skirts, so when they traveled, they would travel with that food. Had it not been for those women taking the food with them, maybe, you know, who's to say some of that food wouldn't have been left behind. And so it's really amazing to be able to grow as a chef, but also learn these stories of the food. In a way, it's the food is kind of calling me to kind of be a vessel for them, or a messenger of like, here's our history. And so I look at it as these are our plant relatives, and I'm just here as the messenger to help tell the story of their legacy.
I love this so much. What are some of the other favorite traditional ingredients that you like cooking with? What would we see most incorporated into what you're creating in the kitchen?
So aside from the Three Sisters, which is beans, corn, squash, I utilize a lot of corn in my food, but also wild game. And so I grew up, my grandfather was a hunter, and so he would bring lots of elk and deer meat to our family and say, here's this meat. You know, we'd have pounds and pounds of deer meat in our refrigerator. So I eat a lot of wild game. I know. So I eat a lot of wild game, and I like to bring a lot of those unfamiliar foods into my cuisine and really educate people on exactly what survival foods are. And so I'm learning a lot about plants at the moment. I kind of geeking out on things like that. Nice. And I love going to the farmer's market and just picking the brains of the farmers and asking them questions about, you know, different weeds and different greens, and utilizing them in my cuisine. So things like wild dandelion are there. Yeah. Make salads, lots of berries. I use maple as a natural sweetener, so I don't use any processed sugars. Nice. And so I'm learning on the, you know, in this journey of how to substitute some of the main ingredients that we're used to cooking with.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so tell us what's kind of, you know, in the life of a chef, because I would assume this isn't really, it's not necessarily for everybody. It's a high pressure, high intensity job when you get to a certain level, right? Is there favorite things that you love to create, or do you kind of lose some of the ability to create some of the favorite things that you would want to be creating because, you know, there's just, you know, you got to do what the client's looking for, right?
Well, that's the funny thing about this journey is I used to be a chef that just cooked whatever my clients wanted. And I just didn't feel fulfilled during that journey, because I used to I had a meal prep service. And so I would only prep healthy meals that tailored to the client's taste or preference or their dietary restrictions. And so I don't do much of that anymore, and a big part of that is just because I didn't feel connected to that food. Yeah. And it wasn't until I started cooking my ancestral foods and relearning those ancestral food ways that I really started to become more passionate about being a chef and about being able to present these ingredients to people that have never had them before. And so luckily I'm very blessed to, you know, if no one wants me to cook my food, which is Indigenous fusion food, then I probably won't take that job. And I have the privilege of being able to say that now. Well, once upon a time where I was doing anything just to get the bills paid, but I'm in such a beautiful place in my journey as a chef that, you know, I can finally say, this is my specialty, this is my niche. If anything outside of that, I probably won't do for you. Perfect. So I have the ability to exercise that power, where I know there are some chefs out there that don't necessarily have that. But yeah, I'm incredibly grateful. Well,
there's absolutely nobody watching APTN InFocus who would turn down the opportunity to eat your Indigenous cuisine. I can guarantee you that we are all lovers of those traditional foods. Okay, so now I want to move to the show. What was it like competing on Next Level Chef, and how was it working with Gordon Ramsay? Like, did he spaz on you at any point in time?
So it's so funny. Being on the show was an incredible experience. It was also absolutely terrifying. Okay. Just because it was just like such high intensity. You know, not only are you not sure what floor and what level and what kitchen you're going to be cooking at on that day, but also like what ingredients are we going to have access to? And, you know, if we're at that bottom kitchen, what are we going to even be able to utilize in our dishes? And so, and you only have 30 seconds. And so when you're looking at that platform and you know the time is ticking, you kind of blank out, you know, and you just start grabbing stuff. And I can't tell you how many times I grabbed chile, like chiles, like jalapenos or a habanero or any type of chile. pepper and corn so many times. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I pick up an ear of corn one more time. But it's because
it's your comfort. It's your go-to. It's your comfort in a stressful situation, right?
Yeah, and so I'm like, okay, I got to really start thinking outside the box a little bit. And so that was really nerve-wracking, but working with Gordon Ramsay was absolutely incredible. The man is everything you think he is and more. He'll pull out a master class out of his pocket within seconds and show you how to to break down a lobster or to do something that was just like mind blown. There were a few times that I cried, like after leaving the set, because I was like, oh my gosh, can't believe I served that to him, or he completely didn't like one of the dishes that I made. But for the most part, I think the audience and as well as the contestants, we got to see a different side of Gordon Ramsay, which is more of a nurturing, mentoring side of him.
No.
Yeah, and people ask, is he really that mean? Did he yell at you? And I'm like, yeah, but it was in an endearing way where he cared, and he was obviously he's like, listen to me, I'm trying to teach you something. And so it's more of a mentorship than it was him being angry. And I thought that was a really amazing thing to be able to see from him. And now I do know him a little bit more closely, and I've had some great conversations with him. And I can say one thing about him is that he really genuinely cares beyond the TV scripts or, being produced on the different shows. He genuinely cares about this work and giving people like myself an opportunity. And for that, I'll be forever grateful.
That actually warms my heart to hear that, because I was one of the people who probably just thought, what you see on TV is what you get. He's just a jerk. So I'm happy that was not your experience. So you're offering pop-up cooking classes.
So I actually do a little bit of cooking classes, but most of the time they're demos. And it's more of a visual, just because now it's kind of a bigger scale of people that I'm talking to.
Yeah, and you're busy.
And I'm busy, and but at the moment I've been able to travel across the U.S. to different tribal communities and teach what I know and also learn from them and have it be a give-take relationship. And so I've been able to go and present some cooking demos and do some really cool pop-up dinners and lunches for them. And so that's been really, really fun.
You have any plans to come up north of the Medicine Line?
I would definitely hope so. I think the rest of this year is pretty booked, but next year I'm really hoping to be able to expand my horizons a little bit. I've never been up north to Canada, but I'm really looking forward to the possibility of working with some of the tribes. Tribal community.
We'd love to have you up here. I'm sure a lot of communities would be very happy to have you come by. Last question for you, what sort of advice would you have for people who are cooking, not professional chefs, just people cooking at home for their families, people who maybe, food insecurity is a huge thing in a lot of our communities up here. What advice would you, if you could speak to them, what would you say? What would you tell them to keep in mind when they're cooking up for their families and trying to be healthy?
For me, I think it's really just exercising your ability to buy cookbooks that are maybe in alignment with the food that you're wanting to try to cook, or research recipes or ingredients. I always try to educate people on things that you can substitute out. So instead of using your pantry items that you would normally find in the store, try to substitute some of them for a little bit healthier alternatives. But you can make healthy food out of canned food or out of frozen foods. But I would really try to avoid saturated fats, cooking oils, fried foods and things of that nature. But it really it's something that you have to practice and learn a little bit more about. And it's not something that's going to be overnight. You're not going to wake up the next day and just crave a bunch of healthy stuff. Yeah. It's usually taking a little time to work things into your diet and try new things out, and then kind of leaving behind the old habits of maybe frying stuff, or try baking things instead, or grilling things. Grilled food is actually the best food, because it's it does something chemically within the meat or the food itself with the fire. And I think that's a beautiful way to cook food and keep it healthy and keep it flavorful. But I would definitely recommend just little by little incorporating things into your diet, trying new things. I would study the shelves of your local grocery stores and and see what you can find in there that's a little bit more of a healthier alternative, and do some research on them.
Yeah.
But I think that's where I would definitely start.
You'd mentioned cookbook, so this will be my last question, I guess. You mentioned cookbook. Will we ever see a Piet cookbook?
So I'm so excited. This is actually the first time I'm announcing it on like a media outlet. So I actually, other than YouTube, I just recorded a first YouTube video, which was kind of an introduction to what I'm doing. So it's at Piet's Plate on YouTube. So you can look out for many more videos talking about what I'm doing with the cookbook and what I'm doing with my life, and also just like who I am, you know, introducing myself to the world. But the cookbook is coming out. I just got my first cookbook deal, and it is called Piet's Plate, a celebration of fire and fusion.
Oh my gosh.
And briefly, I'll give a description. Obviously, fusion would be myself as being Native American, Mexican American, and putting both of those heritages together and those cuisines together and creating really bold, beautiful dishes. But the fire aspect of it is more than just cooking with fire and the actual, you know, tangible thing of fire itself. The fire represents the spirit of Indigenous people. And this book is my effort of keeping the spirit of Indigenous people alive. And I'm Prairie Bend Potawatomi, and we are known as the fire keepers. And what that translates to is being keepers of the fire, of keeping that spirit alive and taking on that responsibility to make sure that our traditions, whether it be for our food traditions, our ceremony, our way of life, our spiritual belief system, stay alive. That's our responsibility. So with this book, I plan to uphold my responsibility on my end to do that and share Indigenous ingredients, talk about their stories, tell their stories, and share recipes that have been passed down, you know, from generations to generations. And so that book is going to be so amazing, and I really can't wait for it. And so I'm not sure when it's going to be. I'm not exactly sure when it's going to be out yet, because we just, you know, I just got the deal, but typically it takes about a year for us to build it out. So I'm hoping by next November it'll be ready for purchase.
In time for Christmas the following year, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, thank you. This was breaking news. Like, I love that we got to be the place where you did it. This is so great, Piet, and such a pleasure to talk to you. And I cannot wait to see where the world takes you from here. I'm sure Creator has big plans for you, and I hope that we get to kind of follow you around in your kitchen exploits for many, many more years. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
I cannot wait for that cookbook to come out. Well, chefs all have to start somewhere, and this past summer, APTN visited a lemonade stand where two 11-year-old entrepreneurs from Curve Lake First Nation in Ontario have perfected their lemonade recipe, and they're making a profit not just for themselves, but they're sharing it with others. Annette Francis brings us their story.
11-year-old Jasper Hunt is helping to set up shop. It's the second summer that Hunt has helped his buddy Hayden run the Little Punks lemonade stand. The first critical step with every lemonade stand begins in the kitchen. Entrepreneurs Hayden Radford and Jasper only use the best ingredients. It begins with rolling the lemons.
There's more juice in the lemon.
It's a favorite hydrating spot. Today, a thirsty bunch of customers from the Curve Lake Day Camp arrived to taste. 11-year-old Carmela says she's been here before.
Well, it's like homemade. It's pretty good. And it's really close.
According to Hayden's mom, Victoria Higgs, after switching the recipe to fresh ingredients, Little Punks has become quite a hit.
I throw $2.50. Okay, actually, then grab me 4 then.
It was so successful that Jasper thought it would be a great idea to donate some of their profits to the Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto.
It would help them out a lot, and it would be like, they would be thankful for it.
Higgs says she's proud of the boys' dedication. Their donation goal is $500, and they're halfway there. They even gained some notoriety with a shout-out on Live with Kelly and Ryan from New York City.
A lot of people say sending in their lemonade stands. Lauren Benson from Curve Lake, Ontario. This is my nephew Hayden getting ready for his day of selling lemonade. He and his friend Jasper do such.
When I heard it, my sister actually brought over a clip from it, and literally my body just went into a tingle, and I had the chills from it. I didn't expect it to ever get this far and this successful like this, actually. So I'm very happy for them. Very happy. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, that's good lemonade. You have to come try this. I'm Annette Francis
at Little Punk's Lemonade Stand in Curve Lake, Ontario.
All right, that's all we have for you on this first episode of a new InFocus season. This episode will be available for download as a podcast on our website at aptnnews.ca/podcast. And if you missed any of the shows or want to catch up, you can check out the website aptnnews.ca. Thank you again to all of you for tuning in. Miigwech, and have a great rest of your day.